is it like being a teacher in 2023? So the year has really only just begun. It's only been a few months, but here are my takeaways. So number one, we'll start off with one of the most obvious ones, the pay. The pay is definitely not enough. Anyone with the same level of education as teachers get paid more. Anyone else with a master's degree would get paid more. And anyone else with that level of experience would also not be supervised the way that teachers get supervised, unexpectedly. There's more on that later. And then, of course, one of the most obvious ones is the nature of students these days. So you always hear about teachers complaining that students used to do this and that in the past. They used to listen more, they used to be more respectful. But that really is true. Because even when I was in high school, which is only about about 6 years ago, students were more respectful to their teachers. At least the school that I went to, teachers would not talk back to the teacher. Students would not talk back to the teachers. They wouldn't disrespect the teacher in front of the entire class, right? That would be a rare thing to do. They wouldn't, complain constantly about the homework, etc., or challenge the teacher's authority, and argue back and forth, debate with the teacher. Students do that more often now. It may just be the area that I work in, but that's another thing that's changed, the quality of students. It might also be COVID, because students have significantly lower reading levels. I have 11th graders who are reading at in 8th grade level or below, a 6th grade level. Some of these students cannot read. And when I ask someone to read a passage in front of the class, they're terrified, they're scared. They're terrified of reading in front of the class. And the reason is because they know that they'll make a mistake, or they're worried that they'll make a mistake. So the reading level and then the quality of education isn't where it is. And that might be because of COVID, because online school was basically a joke. So there's that. And parents are also totally unaware of what teachers go through. Parents think that, we sit down, we see a person's child for 40 minutes, 50 minutes every single day. They think that we have all that time and we're giving your child individual attention. But that's not the case, because you have 29 other kids in that class that you have to pay attention to. And if your child is cutting class, then you're not seeing that child at all. They also don't realize that the time that we spend isn't all spent on teaching. We have other things to do for administration, for school activities, right? Because basically every week there are expectations from administration that you have to do the survey with the kids, you have to get data on their performance, you have to start using this new website, you have to transition to putting grades here, you have to learn this system. It's constant expectations from administration. Because the way it works is you have 2 periods of prep and you have a lunch. But really one of those prep periods ends up being tutoring or administration. So it's you have to meet with your department, and then they have to tell you about what the expectations are for your department, twice a week, right? The support isn't exactly there. They have this system of mentor teachers, etc., but it's not very effective. So you're thrown into, the transition from a substitute teacher to a regular teacher is not very smooth. The support isn't exactly there. Because the system is very, very big, the Department of Education, and there are so many workers and there are so many loose ends to tie that a lot of things get lost and a lot of things take time to catch up. So I became a teacher, and then I think in November I got resources that I should have gotten in August for new teachers, right? new teacher should know this and that, etc. So the system is behind. Like, and that's the same thing for payroll. Like, I've heard that new hires in payroll sometimes they start getting paid a month late because there are just so many workers. Like, it just goes to show that the system is not as efficient as it can be. And the reason why, I have no idea. I mean, maybe because there's so many people, but that's a topic for another discussion, right? So another thing is parent-teacher conferences, ever since COVID happened, is online. It's on Zoom. So now you don't actually see parents face to face. And the reason it's convenient, it's easy, you could just go home and do it. But the reason that worries me is because you're putting the expectation now on the teacher. The teacher has to post the Zoom link. If the parents can't access the Zoom link, the teachers have to find parent contact information and reach out to them. Because before, the parents would come to the teacher waits for them, prepares the information about the student, the parent comes to the school and makes the effort to see the teacher. Now it's the other way around. You're chasing the parents down. Like, if your child is not paying attention, hardly comes to school, then it's hard enough to keep up with your child, but then to have to chase down every single parent is not easy. So I'm worried about a trend of teachers, the expectations, the burden of expectations being placed on the teacher. Because now, what that could mean is that parents will do less and less and expect the teachers to do more and more. They don't realize that we're already doing a lot, right? So, overcrowded classrooms, right? That's a big issue for city schools. It's not a really big issue for my school necessarily. But if you have 31, 32 students and you only have one teacher, then that is a lot to manage. 30 kids talking at once, 30 kids doing two different things, like, that's a lot to manage. That's an issue for a lot of schools. And then another thing that they don't properly prepare you for is, what about students with disabilities? Even if you are not a special education teacher, you have to be aware of the disabilities and the accommodations. The education plan for your students who have disabilities, you have to be aware of it. There's a website and you have to access it and you have to know it and you have to plan your lesson taking that into account. But they don't properly prepare you for that in graduate school. Like, you don't get that emphasis there. Like, they talk about it, they give you resources, but the theory is always different from practice. So even if you cover it in grad school, like, which you do, right? Because there is always a class on special education. To apply it, it feels like they just throw you into the ocean, you know? It's a transition for sure. And then there's English language learners. You have to translate the content and the materials for your students, right? And the school is required to give an ENL student a teacher. So, like, if you have students who don't speak English, there should be a second teacher that is teaching English to them, right? But still, they also don't prepare you for that. If you're in a city school, the amount of students who don't speak English, migrant students, that's like, you have to basically make 2 lesson plans. Okay, sure, you could throw things into Google, like, Google Translate, but is that really doing them service or justice? And the more you stay in the system, the more you realize that you hear about certain schools who are doing things that they're not supposed to do. Very shady things. Maybe with the budget, not spending money on teachers where there should be teachers, not properly addressing the needs of students with disabilities. Like, you find out more and more about this. And it's only been about 3 or 4 months. So this is just my initial impression of what it's like. And they always say the first year is hard. Some even say that, like, the first 3 are hard. But the point is, if you think that you're gonna go and sit and talk to your students, you're gonna teach them, without being interrupted. You get an occasional observation. You have 2 preps. You have your lunch. You have ample time to do your work. You don't really have to do any work at home. There's a little grading. It's not true. That's not what ends up happening. You really only have 1 prep, because the other prep is going to be used for whatever the school needs you to do. Administration has expectations every week. You have a lot of grading that has to go home because there are so many things you have to do in the building, and lesson planning takes a long time. Sure, there are AI tools that help you out. We have those now to translate, to help with lesson plans, to help with PowerPoints, but it still takes a very, very long time. There's a lot of time that goes into this outside of school. So it's a very busy thing, especially for someone who's not familiar with the content. Then you have to learn it and teach it at the same time. It's very complicated. So it's not straightforward becoming a new teacher. And given the economy, given the recession, given inflation, the amount that you get paid is not equivalent to the amount that you work. By no means, right? So make sure you know this. Make sure you're aware of this, prepare for this, and good luck.